Please welcome our fabulous introducers, Madison Davis and Sarah Appel.
Yeah, is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Got it?
After emerging as a leader in the 1980 slam poetry scene in her hometown of Chicago, Patricia Smith established herself as a bridge between written and spoken words and began a career which produces work that flows from the page to engaging live performances.
A four-time Poetry Slam national champion, she enacts, playwrights, teaches. Her 6 books of poetry develop worlds: Blood Dazzler, National Book Award finalist; Tea House of the Almighty, National Poetry Series selection; Should Have Been Jimmy Savannah, winner of the Phyllis Wheatley Award and the Livermore Marshall Poetry Prize from the Academy of American Poets.
The rhythmic lyricism of Smith's work transports the reader into the world of her writing. In some of the words of our fellow student Savannah Hampton, myself getting lost, her words, instinctual, her ability to enter. These places are illuminated blood dazzler. She writes of baby daddies, the jazz of their legs, mama whirls toward hellfire, sis against, unlucky Sunday, buck-toothed man, peppered collared, red heat.
Student Grace Hancock puts it this way: whether her father teaching to make cornbread or a child molester in the Superdome during Hurricane Katrina, it's musical, makes all the world sound beautiful, unromanticized ugliness.
Headlines, historical documents, facts to limit form and move. Her writing, the listener, and observation. No single voice used to relay the experience, points to view a kind of fearlessness. Acting is writing her characters to embody not only what, but why, allowing each its part, its own page.
What it means to be a storyteller through various forms and styles, expanding our worldview more than 30 years.
Patricia Smith.
Thank you. Could you guys just follow me around wherever I walk into a coffee shop? How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. School. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. This is great. It was wonderful seeing. I love the process, the kind of discussion and the person and discussion person. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to try and read some things that I know, at least those of you who were in my discussion group, have read, and we can talk about those later. But I'm kind of stuck, and I thought I'd ask you guys something. I've been working on a book, which was due on the 15th of June. Deadline, silly thing. And I'm stuck because of emotionally prohibitive content. I started out with what I thought was a clear idea, and I keep running into these walls basically because they're poems I don't want to write, but past experience has told me that I may as well just dig in and do it because they're not going to go away. So I'm going to read the poem that kind of started this series for you, and then maybe later you guys can give me some feedback on it, because what I need is I get so close to these poems that I need them to kind of be out in the open air, and I need to see how they're affecting people, if they're affecting people, what you think, over the line, not far enough to the line, up to the wall, over the line, whatever you think. So we'll talk about it when I'm done. I just need to be on the other side of this. So, in February 2010, 21-year-old student Samshid Abdul Rahim abducted his 3-month-old daughter Zara. He placed her in a knapsack, drove to a bridge on the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey, and threw her out of the passenger side window of his car. She drowned in the Raritan River more than 100 feet below. In November 2011, also in New Jersey, Arthur Morgan picked up his 2-year-old daughter Tiara for a trip to the movies. Later, Tiara was found face down in a frigid stream beneath a park overpass, strapped into a car seat which had been weighed down with a car jack. It was unclear whether she was thrown from the overpass or carried into the park and placed in the water. The 5 stages of drowning. 1. Surprise. There is no drunk like the drunk of milk sleep. Drizzled white floods the body and weighs down everywhere we knew about awake. Zara's fresh clockwork staggers with it when her daddy, grizzled and wild-eyed, lobs her like a bag of trash over the rusting rail. Inside the sack, the wriggling child does not know the words fly, plummet, or descend. She doesn't realize the quirky questions she poses for the pigeons, or how, dimmed and stupid with dairy, she is all the fall the sky can language. Trickling from the breast does what it does. Babies accept what they are given. They don't question the morning's crazed deluge of light, a kitchen's blaring stink, or the hungry hovering faces of fathers. Even after a swollen breeze pries her eyes open, in the second it takes for the fevered discarding of a daughter, baby doesn't ask the sun, spiraling into the sack, to offer coup or direction. Zara Malani Lynn Abdul Rahim, little not bird, has been jettisoned, ditched, unloaded. Her snared arms fight and fail to find a suitable rhyme for wing. The river's grim, luminous trash smacks her blunt, but not before her mouth fails its O, not before language breaks its promise to wait for her. If Zara can reach no word for word, no term for the dawning of no, what questions can pale breath answer? Can this daddy's girl, crammed breakneck into a down, down, down that reeks so wildly of him, breathe the dearth of love when she has no sound for love? 2, involuntary breath holding. Imagine filling your body with everything you are and then holding it there. Imagine your body being small, your life consisting of nothing but primary colors and food finger smushed and the stumbling possibilities of dance. Imagine not knowing that whether or not you can contain all of you in tiny balloon cheeks decides whether or not you will continue. Imagine not knowing the word continue. Wisp of fish nibble warily at those fat cheeks, fall into irreparable love, and decide to make a religion of you. Hallelujah, you are now a religion. You are now a church of silt and slither, while daddy roars glee into noontime traffic, thinking not about you, but about your mother, and screeching, oh, so she got another man now, huh? Well, fuck that hoe. I bet this don't fix her bitch ass now. And Tiara, you are the fix for her ass now. You are the fix for your mother's ass now. You are a mute bystander in a Gombe right now reprisal that cannot be retracted. And your slick daddy, now miles away from your plunging, does a slipshod parking job and ambles into a smoky, red-splashed gin mill populated by other men without daughters. Hoisting a fat gold shot, he toasts his one accomplishment, the sweet, uncomplicated removal of a complication. Your cheek deflates, and the door to your next minute closes. You were alive when the stream first lapped its way round you, and the d sound comes easy to the mouth of a baby who wants it. You laughed, Daddy, Daddy, until even the giddy fish re-examined their worship of you. You chirped, Daddy, Daddy, until Daddy stopped meaning anything, and you spat into the mud until you couldn't, and the fickle fish, back in love, drew close to kiss the place where your breath had been. 3, hypoxic convulsions. Daddy is the king architect of a baby girl's roll and rock. He teaches her to manage slink, schools her the mad politic of the wet engine, makes sure she remembers not to breathe in neon or the honed verbs of street corner. If Zara lives, which she most definitely will not, someone else's daddy will teach her all the one way there is not to get lured into a sack, how to lay quietly in the wrong skirt while muscles bloom, how a well-timed convulsion will usually clear the dance floor. Good dancing, like good drowning, hits the backside like an annoyance that must be Watusi loose. But how does we colored respond to a wet that seeks to rearrange her? Of course, drums are injected, and tiara, thrash, and snapdragon shimmies for her giggle back. Baby is the battery that black women build their bodies around until they're saved, old enough to be officially romanced by the latest edition of Jesus. Zara hasn't felt the full hand of the Jesus voice, but she's flirting with that big daddy for all her little worth. Look at her itty-bitty jerkin' boogaloo, that pop swirl of hips she can't find, that runaway rim shot in an unfinished chest. She's rearing back, opening wide, rearing back, opening wide. Two struggling maws are filling with river, filling with river, filling with river, filling. Y'all know nasty music was gonna define that child sooner or later. Brackish water picks up on the rhythm and controls Zara's arms and ankles. It involves the neck. It says, baby, say the last dance for me. 4, unconsciousness. The river, though. She's sluggish and cagey and a bitch sometimes. She has not yet decided to accept Zara, this annoyance in her mouth. The river is crafted of choke, flopped blossom, and the seduced diver. She is repulsed by the unremarkabilities of skin. Seldom is she in a mood to have her swerve analyzed or interrupted. Prying the sack wide with flow, she prods the puckered contents, is not entertained. Intending to add the ugly pudge to her baubles, she finds that she cannot rouse it, is not entertained. The little brown knot fish thing is so flaccid, so unfun, all snazzed up in its sopping petal pink, the eyes closed and rolling, nappy crown trapping things that need to breathe. The most devoted feeders have already had their go at it. The hide slides, puckers, and burps, and damned if the thing won't offer the river proper due, won't beg for its place in the water's arms. It won't say anything. The river flicks her flat finger at it, then flicks it away. She is so over this drama. The end of anything is only a kick to watch once. 5, clinical death. The final stage in the drowning process is death. Clinical death occurs when both breathing and circulation stop. The victim is in cardiac arrest. The heart stops pumping blood. The vital organs are no longer receiving oxygen-rich blood. The lack of oxygen causes the skin to turn blue. There are 52 shades of blue, or 1,052,052, depending upon which river you ask. 3, cornflower. 17, cerulean. 19, blunt force. 22, turquoise. 31, navy. 33, fix for her bitch ass now. 38, sky. 42, goodbye. But the way the river says it, bye, all dismissal and shade. 52, goodbye. But the way a daddy says it, over his shoulder, thrilling the done of the deed, already mad at the traffic. I'm going to try and read some poems from this book that I don't normally read, because I'm a prat. Should have been Jimmy Savannah for a long time. I'm gonna say something. You guys up there on the computer, what are you guys doing? Taking notes on the computer? Okay, you know what? Could you? I'm sorry. It's just like, it's like I scan the room when and every time I do, it brings me back a little bit because I'm going, hey guys, I'm right here. And you're, okay, thank you. Appreciate that. If I ever do that before. This is I was calling this a poetic memoir for a long time. And it started out being a book about Motown. I'm a Motown baby. Anytime I have a chance to listen to any kind of music, that's what I listen to. And it was Motown's 50th anniversary when I started this book, and I said, what I will do is I will write a book. I'll do some persona poems in the voice of Motown artists. I'll do some poems about Motown songs. I'll do some poems about how much sway the music held over me when I was growing up. But then when I started doing those pieces, I realized that it wasn't a book about Motown. It was a book about being first generation up north. My parents, my father came from Arkansas, my mother from Alabama, and when they came up, they were confounded. I mean, you kind of know what the rules are where you're from. And then all of a sudden, you're thrown into this environment, you're in the city, there are new rules, there are still places that you can't go, there's things you have to learn, plus you have this child to raise. So my mother's way of introducing me to the world was to keep me away from it. So I was the kid looking out the window while everybody was out skating and skinning their shins and getting hit by cars and stuff. I was in the window going, I have a book. And so I turned to music a lot. I listened to music a lot to give me ideas about how to live my life. So all of my ideas about life, love, and romance were pretty much defined by whatever Motown song was out at the time. My mother was very quiet about her life before she came to Chicago. So I had to sort of piece together her history from relatives. And my mother was just a rampant tomgirl when she was growing up. And all of her relatives just told me that she hated wearing shoes and she always had dust on her, So, but she always had her eyes pointing toward getting out. So this is me imagining my mother in the South when she was a girl. How mamas begin sometimes. Raging tomgirl, blood dirt streaking her thick ankles and bare feet, she is always running, screech raucous, careening, dare and games at her clothesline throat. Playing like she has to play to live, she shoves at what slows her, steamrolls whatever damn thing won't move. Aliceville, Alabama is no fool, it won't get in her way. Where's that girl going? Past slant sag porches, piece shop, twangy box guitars begging under purple day fall. Combs spitting sparks, hair parted and scalp scratched, mules trembling the back road, the marble stairs of elders fixed on checkerboards. Cursed futures crammed into cotton pouches with pinches of bitterroot, the horrid parts of meat stewed sweet and possible, and still whispers about the disappeared, whole souls lost in the passage. Frolicking blindly, flailing tough with cousins, sisters, but running blaze, running on purpose, bounding toward a way. She can't tag this fever, but she believes it knows her, owns her in a way religion should. Toes tap, feet flatten outside the sin of shoes. She is most times asking something, steady asking, needing to know now, taking wing on that blue restless that drums her. Twisting on the rusty hinge, that old porch door whines for one long second about where she was. But that girl, gone. Okay, what else have I not read? Oh, I don't, by the way, I don't pick things out before I get someplace, as you may have noticed. I kind of come and I then look and see, I look around, I listen to stellar introductions, and then I try to figure out what I want to read. So unfortunately, all right. I might run out of time. All right, it's about my I discovered. Anybody discover sex and just weren't sure that wasn't what was that was what it was? You know, it's just like this really radiating, warm thing going on, and then we didn't until years later. I said, "Oh, that." One of these days, I'll tell you guys the story, my orgasm story. This is how you get an invitation back. One of these days. Invite for next week. Okay. First fiction. I was 12, too young to be left alone mornings after Mama packed her paper hat and sugar-dusted shoes to push gumballs down the assembly line. So I was unceremoniously dumped at the door of old Mrs. Gore's mouse-addled basement hovel, where the matron of snapping gum and gray grin ushered me in and plopped me down in a chair that stank of a dog they didn't own. Seeing how I was bleary and unslept, Mrs. Gore would open the door to the bedroom where her twin girls, Kathy and Karen, still dreamed on the edge of alarm. Peppery, flailing, their waking bodies unwound to carve me room. I don't know how it started, how, wordlessly, Karen and I tussled skin, adjusted knee and cunt, naturally knew the repeating mouth and its looping stanza. She smelled like what I couldn't stop swallowing. Content to thrive on a flickering cinema of ourselves, our eyes fluttered and never fully opened. We pretended a blazing slumber, hushing the grind, the soft rustle of sparse sweating pubic, even after her unsuspecting sister stretched and tumbled out to begin her day. Strange she didn't suspect our engine. For as long as we could, Karen and I stayed prone in exquisite pressurized tangle beneath the knotty orange chenille. We kept up the being blind, crashing into dampening borders until her fat mother shuffled in to rouse us, throwing shades open to the damnable day, introducing the stupid, useless notion of language again. By then, there was a drum buried in our bellies. We stank like men, all up under that sweet funk that first sin leaves behind. Tell me all my business. Jeez. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna do this. So this is really old, but I want to talk about how poems come from really weird places. So I watch a lot of trash television. So I'm gonna do like 2 trash television poems. This came from Clash of the Titans, the original, which is the only Clash of the Titans. You know how when you get ready for school and you see the skeletons fighting, and you're like, oh well, I'm just not going today. You sit there and you watch the whole thing, right? You know which one I'm talking about, the Ray Harryhausen one with the stop. Really? Hello? Right? Thank you. I won't even watch the new one. I mean, that's just a travesty. That's not happening. So I was watching, I was thinking about Clash of the Titans, and it got to the thing with Medusa, because, Jason's going after Medusa, and it's this really dark, eerie thing, and she's in the thing, And then I started thinking, well, how did Medusa become Medusa? And it used to be a lot of mythology, but I've forgotten. And she made love to Poseidon in Athena's temple. And Athena was like, oh no, you didn't. So then Athena took her body through that, said, oh, this is what's gonna happen to you, bitch. Anyway, so she had the thing where she was, you look at a man, he turns to stone. That kind of would be enough, right? You want men to turn to stone when they look at you, but not that part of it. So it's just like, okay. So men will turn to stone, and if that wasn't enough, she was like, oh, and your hair, honey, your hair. We must do something with your hair. So the snake thing goes on, right? So this is a persona poem in Medusa's voice as her body is going through these changes, which I hope after the introduction I remember. Poseidon was easier than most. He calls himself a god, but he fell beneath my shaking with more. No, he fell beneath my hands with more shaking than any mortal. He wept when my robe fell from my shoulders. I made him bend his back for me, listen to his screams break like waves. We defile that temple the way it should be defiled, squirming and bucking our way from corner to corner. You know, the bitch goddess probably got a real kick out of that. I'm sure I'll be hearing from her. She'll give me nightmares for a week or so that I can handle. Or she'll turn the water in my well into blood. I'll scream when I see it, and that'll be that. Maybe my first child will be born with the head of a fish. I'm not even sure it was worth it. Poseidon pounding away at me like a madman, losing his immortal mind because of the way my copper skin swells in moonlight. Now my arms smoke and itch. Hard scales are rising on my wrist like armor. Come on, Athena. He was just another lay, and not a particularly good one at that, even though he could spit steam from his fingers. I won't touch him again. Promise. And we didn't mean to drop to our knees in your temple, but our bodies were so hot and misaligned. It's not every day a gal gets the sample of God, you know that. Why are you being so rough on me? I feel my eyes twisting, the lids crusting over and boiling, the pupils glowing like red coals. Athena, woman to woman, could you have resisted him? Would you have been able to wait for the proper place, the right moment to jump those immortal bones? Now my feet are tangled with hair, my ears are gone. My back is curving and my lips have grown numb. My garden boy just shattered at my feet. Damn it, Athena! Take away my father's gold. Send me away to live with lepers. Give me a pimple or two. But my face, to have men never again gaze in my face, growing stupid in anticipation of that first touch. How could any woman live like that? How can I watch their warm bodies turn to rock when their only sin was desiring me? They just want to see me sweat. They just want to touch my face and run their fingers through my hair. It's ugly. Woo! Two more then. Is that okay? Just another jump. This is I was watching Naked Gun 2.5, Naked Gun 3, Naked Gun and Beyond, Naked Gun and Your Mama. I don't know. This is Naked Gun, one of the Naked Gun movies. And you know the Naked Gun movies. It was the Leslie Nielsen. He was this inept police, you know. So in one of them, he had his heart broken by, his woman in the movie was supposed to be Priscilla Presley, right? So he had his heart broken by the Priscilla Presley character. And he goes into this bar. And it's a bar specifically for men who have had their hearts broken. So it's like when we rip their hearts out of their chest, they go to this bar. There was like a key card to get in, women didn't know about it. So you go in and there were these pictures on the wall. And there's like a picture of the Hindenburg, and it's like all this bad. And for some reason, there was a picture of Michael Dukakis there. I don't figure out why. But there were all these pictures of these disasters, and there were men like looping nooses around their necks and loading pistols, getting ready to shoot themselves in the head. The kind of place we like girls. So I thought, you can't show a scene like that to a writer and just have them walk away and not do anything. So this is called The Ultimate Blues Bar, which I also hope I remember because I haven't done in years. In the Ultimate Blues Bar, men sip their bitter cocktails, slide damp dollars across the bar, and wheeze in rhythm, resenting the relentless thump of their late-night hearts. They speak fondly of natural disasters, predict how the missing child will be found naked beneath a blanket of dead leaves. Someone pops a quarter in the jukebox, and feet tap to the dirge of downbeats, the been done wrong grunts that slug through the blood like a blind fighter. When a woman rips a man open, this is where he comes to bleed. I should have known the bitch was no good, screams a truck driver from his corner table. I should have seen she was what she was. The circus lights in the jukebox break across his face, fill his toothless mouth with color as he screams the name, Janet! As he curses it up and down the greasy walls, drags it in the muck on the floor in front of his friends. He pulls the name back up on the table, and he tries to slice his wrist with it. He holds the name against his skull and waits for it to scatter his brains. He swallows it and sits dead still so the poison can creep into his blood. He takes the name, Janet, and he rocks the room with it. I should have seen she was no good for me. I should have listened to my friends. I should have looked deep into her smoky black eyes and walked out on what they told me. And damn, Janet, and screaming the name over and over and over like he's purging his belly of bad whiskey. He staggers to the jukebox and plays another long, slow song by a blind black man. Tonight, he's got that run from Moline to Macon. And Janet will sleep curled in a bigger bed, a deep purple gash over her eye, another man on her mind. Bless them. Bless them as they weep on their own sagging shoulders, rolling the soft syllables of love around in their mouths. Bless them as they bend the bartender's ear. With blues she pretends she's never heard, as she nods patiently to every twist of their gut. Bless them as even the shot glasses take on the curves of women. Bless them as the barkeep closes shop, and our boys link wobbly arms and croon their blues to an amused moon who bends their hearts until she realizes that only a woman has the balls to break them. Women are like, yes, yes. Guys are like, no. Change the code, she knows about the place. All right, one more, and I've made myself a vow that I would read one more. That, see if I just read something that I've never. Okay. So, like I said, this book is as much my parents' book as it is mine, and my mother does not read my work. We can talk about that if you would like. But this is way back in the beginning again, and it's basically to all of the people who made that journey, who left the South with no real idea of what was going to be waiting for them, and especially those who went to Chicago, because there had already been a part of Chicago carved out for everyone who was coming in. It's basically, hello, we're going to turn this into a ghetto, and you can all come live here. And later became one of the country's largest ghettos, actually. But this is, you know, before that all happened, I'm imagining a couple in the South. And, oh, no, that's not this poem. It's just, well, okay. It's, okay, it is dedicated to people coming up from the South. One way to run from it. The damn bold weevil hisses his goodbye while cypresses drip low in steamed salute, and satchel-toting travelers multiply, affixed to that bright dream, the absolute reversal of their route. Their gospel hum dissuades the Delta dog, his resolute pursuit of traitors' souls. The city's drum, the new unyielding, slaps old backdrops dark. Chicago, frigid siren, murmurs, come, while hiding how she fails. December's stark and violent entry into bone, the ways a factory's drone can siphon every spark of will. She boldly lures them with cliches, the gilded path, the blur of black and white. Seduced, they set their southern past ablaze. Intent on fresh religions, taking flight without their wings, they're stunned in hurtling seats. This train moans in a way that just ain't right. That's it. Questions? Anyone? This is right. I'm supposed to say questions, anyone? Right?
Yeah,
Questions,
they
anyone?
just always take about 17 seconds and then they start. So.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the poems you write in parts. I love 13 Ways of Looking at 13. And 13 Ways of Looking at 13 is obviously very long.
Mhm.
How do you approach writing? Do you approach it each section as its own poem? Do you write it chronologically? Or do you start from the middle?
Okay, in that one, I teach at a college where I have a very hard time getting my students to write the show. So it was time for finals, and they came trudging in with their shoulders down. And I said, "Hey, guess what? No final today! Yay, yay!" They picked me up and carried me around. I said, instead, and I talked to them about what their most difficult age was. And the consensus in the class, although not everyone said it, was 13. And I asked them, I said, instead of a final, I want you to write a poem about what your life was like at 13. I want it to be 13 stanzas, 13 lines each stanza, 13 syllables each line. And when I give them something like that, it's as much for me as it is for them because I need to write. So I said, okay, I'm going to write about my 13. So each one, it was like, if I looked at my life at 13, like this, every once in a while I stop and I go, and that was that poem. So it was meant that I could put, and I often do when I don't have time to read them all, I might read 3 of them, or I'll read one, so that one was approached pretty much, each one was separate, and I wrote them over a span of time, like something else would hit me, and I'd go, oh, that's another thing that was miserable about being 13, My skin was awful, my mother was, she kept me away from things, which was an absolutely the wrong thing to do. The guys who would catcall and you know what to do with them and all that stuff. So as each thing occurred to me, I would just write that segment in it. Other long poems, they're different. Like the one about my parents, the Annie and Otis Annie one. That's a double sestina. So that was me trying to figure out which forms I had studied that I had in my toolbox, and which one would fit. That so there was a big sprawling story, and I thought, let's try that, and it wound up being the right one. So it depends on what the subject matter is, and whether or not I have the ability or can pull out a form that I think would work for it. And the 13 ways of looking, which means that any one of them, and I want them to be separate because there might be somebody who just, you might not connect to 12 of them, and one might go, that's the one for me. And that's what I was trying to do. Yes?
So do you usually come up with like a concept or the idea and then you find a form to fit that, or do you ever like have a form in mind and then think of?
I did, when I was in my MFA program, I was studying, I decided to take the whole time to study form and metrics, okay? So at that time, I would I think, reach a certain level of, not mastery, but I would be confident in a form, and I'd want to do it right away. So then I would just go, I gotta write a bill now, I gotta write a bill on, and but it was only, I considered that just practice so that, when you first learn a form, everything you write is in that form. You can't help, it's like, oh, I have to. And then you can tell everybody. That's how you get all these poems that are called so-and-so villanelle, or so-and-so, because, hey, I wrote a villanelle. But I was doing that just to get them in the toolbox. So for instance, there's a poem in Blood Dazzler called Ethel Sestina, okay? And Ethel's an elderly woman. So you know how elderly people, when they speak, they come around to comfort points in their language, and they'll repeat themselves a lot, and and so I thought about her way of speaking, or how I've heard elderly people speak. Then I thought, what form lends itself to that kind of record? And I said, okay, it's sestina, because you've got those 6 words that keep coming around and coming around. So it wound up being, so right now I would say I consider the poem first, and then whether or not there's a poem that can help, a form that can help heighten the reader's response to the poem. And that it works that way. Yes.
You mentioned your mother doesn't read your work.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk about that.
If I could talk about why my mother doesn't read my work. I think my mother has come to exactly one reading, and that was years and years ago. And what happens is, I had poems about family that I said out loud in front of a room full of strangers. And it's a very, in ways of a very kind of secretive culture. And it was early on, there wasn't a lot of this going on. And so the idea that I spoke about family that freely, and I could say the reading she went to, there was nothing negative about, but that was a betrayal to her. And I've gone on to try and explain to her, I am charged with the telling of my own story. And you're in it, and so is the rest of the family. And if I don't tell it, I give someone else permission to tell it. And I can't do that. I've introduced her to some of my friends who, we're all doing the same thing. It's vitally important to us. But no, she would rather not. And the whole idea of creative writing as a career never gelled with my mom. Up until probably about 10 years ago, she would call me and she said, they're hiring at the post office. Which was a solid job, as far, you work a certain amount of time, you work, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, 20 years or whatever, you get your benefits, you get your vacation, you get your retirement money. It was solid. So when they came up from the South, it was with their eyes on a job like that. So to say, I do readings and, she'll come in Friday and say, did you get paid today? I said, I don't get paid like that, So we tried everything. My husband and I sent her like pay stubs, it's like all kinds of things. And she can't process that. It's not, even if you tell her, hey, I got this grant and they gave me $1 million, and she'll say, well, how long is that gonna last? So that's what that's about. Yes.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago. I think that cities have it's funny because I was arguing with people all the time about Chicago versus New York, all the time. And I think that cities have a definitive rhythm. I think New York's rhythm comes from a lot of different places and then tries to meld. I think Chicago has more of a singular rhythm. And I think that rhythm kind of defines my writing. I think the idea that I'm willing to say some things out loud. And when I say Chicago, a lot of it had to do with being there at the beginning of the Poetry Slam, too. What you are and aren't willing to be vocal about. Plus, my father, when he came up from the South, he brought with him something I like to call the tradition of the back porch. So at the end of every day, it was like, Dad sits down, you sit down, he talks about his day. My mother and father both worked at a candy factory. You guys know malted milk balls? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was my family. Anyway, we worked, yeah. They worked at a candy factory, and it was this continuing, like, serial narrative. It was like a drama, who was cheating on whose wife in the candy factory, and who was sneaking candy home. I mean, it was just like, so I would sit there at the end of the day like, okay, what happened to this guy, So early on, I kind of learned to look at the world in terms of stories I could tell. So I think that the mixture of my father, the music that I was listening to, which is very much unlike music today, Motown songs told stories. They had beginnings, middles, and ends. It wasn't like, let's just get to the loop and say it 3 million times. It was like a verse, a chorus, a verse, a chorus, boy meets girl, boy messes girl over, I'm sorry, girl boy messes boy or something, and then somebody leaves somebody, and then the last part is just begging, it just fades out begging. You know, if I was begging, Temptations were like the masters of begging. They would just come into concerts and just go across the stage on their knees, like, please, baby, please come back. Ah, and we like that stuff. Anyway, so, and all that sort of combined to, I think you can probably, at anything I do now, you can probably, if you look at it closely enough, you can pick a couple of those elements out of it. I think I'd be a totally different poet if I was born somewhere else. Chicago rocks. Yes? Something I don't want to vocalize? Yeah, but when I say I don't want to vocalize it, it's basically the same as saying I can't vocalize it yet. Okay, because if it's pressing me, asking to be vocalized, I have to find some way to kind of reach through. I teach a workshop called Writing on the Other Side of the Wall, which is just about that. I think that we spend a lot of time trying to access difficult material. Some of us give up, some of us are close enough to touch the wall, but all the mining we should be doing for our writing is on the other side, and how do we get over there? You know, I mean, just talking about my mom, if my mom and I were not related by blood, we probably would not be friends. I mean, think about, you've discovered what your passion is in life, and the person who is closest or supposed to be closest to you does not recognize that passion. It's a difficult situation to be in, you know. So I'm just really getting to the point where I'm really, you know, part of me just waited and waited, thinking she'll come around, she'll come around. She's getting older and older, she probably won't. So where does that put us? Where does that put us? And I'm just starting to kind of talk about that out loud, and I know that that's got to worm its way into my writing. I write about my father quite a bit, and I think I skirt around this book is the closest I've ever gotten to really talking about my mom. That and then stuff that I encountered, like the first poem that I did, I just don't want to do anymore. And the same thing that happened with Blood Dazzler. I started with one poem, thinking, okay, that's the poem I set out to write. And unbidden, it just kind of opens this door and says, you know, no, you've internalized more than you think you have, so you need to keep writing. So those are the kind of things I take and I move around on my desk, and I hope I lose the computer file, and but they don't go away like that. Anybody else? Yes.
Could you maybe talk about approaching that type of subject matter and how, like in the first poem, because there was lines of humor in it, but it was such a horrible subject. How do you embody that and write it? How do you approach it?
I think it's a matter of I think it was the fourth stanza where I just go, the river. I have to think of, I have to look for an unexpected entry point, which is actually something that's good to think of for whatever kind of writing you're approaching. If you imagine that 800 people are sitting down to write the same thing. So the river allowed me to enter the piece by thinking, oh, you know, she's going to have an attitude, she's going to do this, what is this thing in the water, and it allowed me to kind of look at the baby first as an object that the river had to deal with. Because if I started with, here goes this ass throwing this baby over out of the car window, over the bridge, and that's where I did start at the beginning. So this one's taken me a long time to write. And the reason I do what I do, and I talk to people about it, is I'm hoping somebody will say, no, it's too much, don't do it. Don't write anymore, because there's other stuff to be written. I've looked into the cases, I've got, you know, other poems and things. But I look for that one point that's going to allow me emotional access, and then I work out from there. Okay, so I can get closer to it with each thing. Or I could then go and say, okay, I'm just going to do a whole poem about the river now, or something. So I'll dance around it for a while until I realize that, and can see my avoidance and know that that's what it is. and then I'll force my way in a little bit more. Anybody else?
I'll ask one last question. Or unless someone, is there a hand there?
Don't be trying to Facebook me with it. I have a question.
I just wanted to ask about the idea of writing from the point of view of Hurricane Katrina. Just how, because you were talking a little bit about just inception of films and ideas, how did that idea come to you, meaning to write from the point of view of?
The Hurricane Katrina thing, it started out as one poem, but then once I realized that there were other things to be written and I wanted to keep going. Early on, when I was concentrating mostly on performance, the place I used to go in Chicago was a place called the Green Mill. It was a wonderful venue, old jazz club, just amazing. And they have poetry slams at the end of the night, and there was a woman who was a slam champion when I started coming. Her name was Lisa Viscani. And Lisa Viscani had a poem about the barbers who cut the hair of people right before they were going into the gas chambers. I mean, and it's that one kind of poem that at the end you're like, applaud, but there's this white hot moment of silence, you have no idea what to do. And so early on I figured out the power of persona. And just like I said before, you learn something and everything's a persona. I was like, oh look, there's gum on the bottom of that seat. I wonder what it's like to be a piece of gum. Everything, you know, and it's that's kind of so you know where you're rooted. You do it, and then you say, okay, now I know what the possibilities are. There were two ways to approach Katrina. It was as the witness. See, I'm already not a first-hand witness because I'm not from the Gulf region. I'm not from New Orleans. I'm already back one step. And you can only do so much with that. This is what I see. This is how I interpret. This is what I see. This is how I interpret. This is what I see. Once you do a persona piece, it's like, this is how she sees. So it was an opportunity to have Katrina herself be alternately remorseful, vengeful, giddy, scared, whatever. And if you could humanize the storm, because a lot of us had already kind of numbed ourselves to what the people were going through. And that was the unexpected entry point. It was the unexpected entry point into the book. So what's it gonna be, what's it gonna be? She needs to have her own voice, and she needs to drop into the book every once in a while. So something happens, it's like, what does she think? So 34 nursing home residents die, and Katrina comes in and says, you prayed to the wrong person. You prayed to God, I'm right here. You need to be talking to me, you know, and that's why this happened. And then she goes away again. She comes in, wait a minute. One of the old hurricanes that didn't cause as much damage comes back and talks to her, or something, she talked. And it was just a way to kind of make it not so much poetic news report, And then we wound up doing a dance theater production, and the woman who danced Katrina took a leave from dancing in Wicked on Broadway. No money, we had no money. She was amazing. And so then it actually really took shape in my head. Every time I read something in Katrina's voice now, I see her. So that makes me think it was a good idea, it was a good field to do that. Yes.
Last question.
In Blood Dazzler, I was wondering, especially because it's set up so well chronologically, if you were writing this during the storm and writing them as these stories came out and as the articles were coming out, or if it was after the fact and through research.
No, I wrote 34 first. That's the one I thought, that's the poem that's pressing at me. That's the one I'm going to write and finish and roll into my readings and talk about Katrina a little bit and be done with it. And that wasn't the case. I went to some reading in Palm Beach, Florida. It there's a Bentley on the lawn. You ever go to a reading where there's a Bentley outside of the reading? But I read that poem, and there was a woman in the middle of the audience who was very jittery. She's looking at her watch, and you could tell if she wasn't in the middle of the audience, she wanted to leave. And afterwards, because I wasn't from New Orleans, I would always, when I saw something like that, I said, maybe something's not ringing true in the poem, and I should talk to her. And she was like, oh, well, they just had Mardi Gras. And in her head, the fact that they had Mardi Gras meant that everything was okay. Or there were people just waiting to see one building go up or one nail being hammered or something, and they say, oh, New Orleans is okay now, on to the next thing. And so that's what kind of angered me and made me think, well, maybe 10 years from now, somebody will pick up a book in the remainder bin and they won't buy it, but they'll say, oh, that's right, Katrina happened. And maybe at that point, that's all we could hope for. So once that happened, I didn't go chronologically. I wrote about things that stayed, like Ethel and her dying in her wheelchair and things like that. The visions that stayed with me. My husband at the time, he's still my husband. At the time, my husband was working at the Associated Press. He was the editor. So he would bring home pictures that they couldn't use in their newspapers, usually because they were too graphic. So that's where the dead dog draped over the power line came from. So things that I hadn't, or that kind of paved over and wasn't remembering, he was coming home with stories and pictures and stuff and helping me. So it got filled in kind of piecemeal and then arranged roughly chronologically. It would have been difficult for me to write it chronologically, unless I had really started at the beginning of the storm and done that. But I didn't even write them in order when I decided to do it. I like talking. Yay!
Okay, one last question.
You want a tight ship, don't you? Am I allowed to ask them? Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your history with Poetry Slam. And Poetry Slam, it started at the Green Mill, right? Were you there?
It started in Chicago.
Right.
It started at a place called the Get Me High in Chicago, and not that long after we moved to the Green Mill. Oh, you want me to? Okay. There was an event in Chicago called Neutral Turf, and it was meant to bring together street poets and academic poets, because there was this supposed line, and nobody talked to each other. You know, it was like they didn't all use language. It was hilarious. And this was 5 hours in a blues club over the course of a winter afternoon. And I went there because I had lots of things that I liked. Indoors in Chicago in the winter, alcohol, and poets who I thought would read stupid things, and I could sit in the back and laugh with some friends of mine. So I went to laugh at the poets and drink. And I got there, and what I found out was, and I was thinking poetry was going to be that stupid stuff that's relegated to the bookshelves, you know, like Pigpen and Charlie Brown, dust comes up, and you go, oh. Or it was going to be about some flower growing through concrete, and you get it like 3 months later. So I was there doing that, and then I realized I was listening to this progression of poets, and they were reading about stuff that we'd all seen on the news, and the language was engaging and immediate. And, you know, the older poets would come up and they'd do something, and the younger ones come and riff off that. And in the front row, with her stockings up, you know, rolled up under her knees, and her little Coke bottle glasses, was Gwendolyn Brooks. Even I knew Gwendolyn Brooks, you know. And she would comment to people as they were coming off stage. She remembered lines and stuff. And I said, there's a vibrant literary community in the city where I live, and I didn't know anything about it. So I introduced myself to somebody with a clipboard, because I thought he knew what he was doing. He told me all the other places where there were open mics, and one of the places was the Green Mill. I went there. I was horrified at the idea of the slam at first, for about 5 seconds, and then I realized that I am competitive. So they had an open mic, they had a feature, and so you could get a whole realm of things that night, you know. And I think it was, not a lot of it was going on. It was going on in New York, and then you know, Boston, and it just kind of, it was like a Johnny Appleseed type thing. It kept going and going and going. I had no idea it would get as big as it is. The idea, what I believe about it, without going on and on and on, is that it's a really wonderful place to root yourself for a while. It's a great place to start. It's a great community to stay involved in, although you might not always want to stay involved as a slammer. Right now, there's a great organization. There's the youth slams. There's the urban word thing. There's all, you know, all those things. A lot of the venues are having classes around the evenings. You know, it's amazing. So I love still being in that realm. I do think that it's a wonderful base. Like, I can go into any room. I don't care if the mic's working or not, if the cappuccino machine is going, if there's somebody talking. It's just not an issue, you know. And so being comfortable in front of an audience is one of the major things that I got from it. But also my family, the people who I was surrounded with as I was coming up in the slam, to this day are closer to me than some members of my family. That I would fall back at any moment across the country. They could be across the country and catch me, you know. And it's that kind of love and trust that lets me know that I did not make a mistake by entering in that, as opposed to going. What's going to school? As opposed to you know, studying and going the route. You know, I did that later. But it's a foundation that I could not trade for anything else. So the slams that go on, you know, the slams that go on at Barkentine and the New Eurekan and all that are well worth, I mean, they're communities that just will not quit for both beginning poets and people who have been at it for a while, you know. That's where I found my second throat. You know, and it's taken me really far. It's never failed me. I can go into any situation. It's like I was at the New Eurekan one point and I was looking and I said, I was on this panel. I said, well, there's Mark Strand and Tom Slay and Ed Hirsch and me. And we were supposed to be getting up and reading and talking about poetry, and I refuse to be that drab, you know. It's like, whoa. You know? And I won't do that, you know. So at the time, I had just sent off like an application to Guggenheim, and you know, Ed Hirsch is like the head of Guggenheim. So I was like, do you read the applications, or can I get you a drink? You know. And after a while, after he was all, you know, he started laughing, and just like, come on, you know, lighten up. So it lets me see everything for kind of what it is, and lets me see the stuff that's been piled up on top of it, that you know, kind of chip away at and say, look, we're all doing the same thing. Slam forever. Anybody else?